Greetings, scholars. It's Brian again. Last time we talked about claims and we talked about evidence, and today I want to talk specifically about support. Support's an important part of argument and advocacy. Remember, we're trying to learn how advocacy works and the root causes of argument and why people disagree. I'm going to talk about three things in this short discussion. First, I'm going to talk about an audience-centered theory of argument. Second, I'm going to talk about values as a form of support also in addition to evidence. And third, we'll talk a little bit about the editorial analysis speech that you have coming up. Now, in our textbook, there's a definition of argumentation. It says that argumentation is the communicative process of advancing, supporting, criticizing, and modifying claims so that appropriate decision makers, defined by relevant spheres, may grant or deny adherence. This definition tells us a few things about argument. It tells us that argument really is about the decision makers. That is, there are people involved. You can't have argument if there are no people. It defines these people as groups of spheres. Spheres, it's not a location. It's in fact a group of people charged with making a decision on something. There are multiple spheres, they might overlap. They're collections of people in the process of interacting upon and making critical decisions. Now, you're probably already involved in several spheres of argument. You're in your family unit. You have to decide how expenses are allocated, how groceries are tackled, all of those problems. But you're also in a larger sphere. You're a part of our student body. And our student body is charged with making decisions on how we allocate our funds. Are we going to support our athletics teams? All of these is a sphere as well. And you're probably a part of what we call the public sphere. The public sphere is our broadest conception of a group of people making collective decisions. That's really something like our nation deciding, are we going to support free speech? How are we going to respond to threats abroad? What are we going to do about the economy? All of these things you're involved in also. So that's the way that argument functions, is through decision makers. People are important for argument. They have to be in there. Now, last time we mentioned, and I want to reiterate, when we use this word argument, remember that's the smallest unit of advocacy. It really has a couple different meanings. An argument one we discussed as a claim or a statement, an argument as a product. Now, the term itself also means argument as a process. So right now we're talking about the difference between somebody saying, that person made a really good argument, that's argument one, as I observed two people and they were in an argument. There was argument two. And remember, there are people who even study what we might call argument zero, the discussion process inside your head of coming to and arriving at decisions, that's advocacy as well. Now, last time we talked about evidence. Today I want to talk a little bit about the use of values in argumentation. Yeah, we talked about claims of value, but I'm talking about value as a form of support. You see, people disagree on things, and they don't disagree necessarily just over the presence or absence of data. Think about the controversies in the world and ask yourself, is there some piece of information that's going to resolve this conflict? Or is it that people disagree because they're coming at it from fundamentally different values? In fact, ask yourself some very, very basic questions. You have a cell phone or a smart device. Why do you have that particular cell phone? Is it because it's got some evidence that backed it up in the advertising? It's particularly good at doing one thing? Because chances are most cell phones are very competitive on that. Instead, you were sold a brand. And that brand spoke to you because it spoke to your values. Now, we talked about different types of claims, and I categorized them, and you couldn't have a claim of fact that is also a claim of value. But for values, really, we're trying to understand the way that they operate. So I'm going to talk about some different schemas. I'm going to talk about the difference of a stated versus an implied value. So sometimes values can be stated, like when someone says you should have equal pay for equal work. Well, there, the value is equality. It's explicitly stated in the argument. But sometimes the values are only implicit. If someone says you should study more, there's a value there. That value is learning, but it's not explicitly stated. As well, values can be positive or they can be negative. Positive values, those are the things we're trying to get in life, the things that are desirable, freedom, self-respect, liberty. Arguers use these as a resource to try and convince people. On the other hand, values can also be negative. Negative values are things that are undesirable, falsity, fear, inattention. These are things arguers use to try and motivate you to act in a particular way. Even more tricky, values can be instrumental or they can be terminal. Terminal values are the ends that we're trying to get to in argument. Security, equality, happiness, love. These are things we'd like to achieve in our life. And arguers and advocates use these to try and motivate people to act. But the means we use to get there, those are also important. Those are what we call instrumental values. Ambition, it's a good thing in and of itself. Helpfulness, self-control. being polite. Being polite's not a destination you can arrive at, but it is something that's good to have in your life, and you may encounter advocates who are using politeness as a strategy to motivate people into action. Now, most of the time we think of values as abstract. When we talk about justice or truth, these are things that arguers are trying to attach to particular things. But it is possible and common that objects can serve as values for a particular group. When someone's discussing and using the flag as a reference, that's really a value. They're trying to motivate people on patriotism, or even the office of the president. It's not the individual that's important there. It's the office that is the source of the value that's being used to try and motivate folks for things. So there's a little bit about needs and values to help us get started on the way that support works even more than just evidence. Good luck, scholars.